Well, thank you all for coming. I'm having a great time in Australia. It's really a beautiful country and so many great people, so it really is a lucky country. Today I thought I would speak about the two most important books in the yoga tradition, ancient texts, which have always been considered authoritative, at least for many centuries. One is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and the other is the Bhagavad Gita by our personal guy, Krishna. So I'll begin by saying a few words about the Yoga Sutras. I'm working on a translation of it, actually. I've already translated it, but I'm going to do some commentaries and publish it in the near future, hopefully before I'm dead. So, the Yoga Sutras, first of all, the word sutra. The word sutra is actually cognate with, that means linguistically connected to English words like suture or sew, like to stitch. And so sutra in Sanskrit actually means a thread. And is a term we still use in English, thread, to mean like in Hollywood, just the bare outline of the story, the thread of the story. And so it has that same sense in Sanskrit. So a sutra is a very condensed, almost condensed to the point of unintelligibility, but they got a little too enthusiastic sometimes about condensing. But anyway, it's a highly condensed statement in Sanskrit, which then has to be explained. And of course, the advantage of making things very short, it was easy to memorize, and also, I suppose that way they could keep it esoteric. Some people like esoteric things, and so if it's not obvious what something means, then it's esoteric. Anyway, so the Yoga Sutras begin with a simple statement, Ata Yoganushasanam. Now the teaching on yoga. And the word teaching, actually there's a lot in there, so I'm going to explain something about that word. The word Anushasanam, Ata just means now, yoga Anushasanam. First of all, the word Anu in Sanskrit means following, and in the sense of following, it can mean like continuous, like one after another. And in this particular case, shasanam means a teaching, but it comes from the Sanskrit root shas, which has a sense of an authoritative teaching, because the teaching may not be authoritative. A lot of people teach things that we may not believe. But in this case, for example, shastra, the word shastra is the Sanskrit word that's normally translated scripture, in the sense of an authoritative revelation of something. And of course, Shastra can also mean just an authoritative book of any genre. So when you put these two words together, and then Shasana means an authoritative teaching. So Anushasana means Patanjali is declaring that he's not going to give you his latest, greatest new idea, but he's actually going to give you a tradition. Just like, for example, in Europe, you may know Homer, who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey. And what scholars agree on is that Homer actually was presenting a tradition which was ancient even in his life. And he just did it so well that everyone kind of threw out the other editions and let's go with Homer. But actually Homer was presenting an ancient tradition. And similarly, Patanjali is presenting a tradition which for him is ancient. And therefore he says, Anushasanam. It's a teaching which is going to follow a tradition. And by using the verb shasanam, because there's different words in Sanskrit that mean to teach, but this particularly indicates that it's going to be an authoritative teaching following what he considers to be a valid tradition coming down from ancient times. So that's the very first Yoga Sutra. Ata Yoganushasanam. The next sutra, he defines what yoga is. He says, Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodham, which means yoga is the stopping of the turnings of the mind. And if you look at all the Yoga Sutra translations online, many people have a real genius for being non-literal. But anyway, what the word vritti actually means is turning. And in that sense, the idea, if you read the whole book, soon to be a major motion picture, right? Yoga Sutras. Anyway, so if you read the book, the idea is that the mind tends to turn away from the truth. And of course, it's understood here, there is a truth. There is an absolute truth. We don't live in sort of an existentialist hell where we can never really understand our existence, and so we just smoke a lot of cigarettes in Paris and write pessimistic books. So, anyway. One thing I should say also is that the Yoga Sutras are really a book of practical psychology. You could almost say like, yoga for dummies or something. Patanjali actually meant this to be a non-sectarian book, a book that everyone can use. And therefore, for example, the background is at that time, at the time of Patanjali, maybe a few hundred years before Christ, that everybody was doing yoga. And I mean serious yoga in the sense of meditating and the whole thing, Ashtanga. Ashta, of course, means 8. If you know Spanish, it's ocho or acht in German. So all those words are they're actually related to Sanskrit. Ashta, 8. And anga means a limb or a part of something. So ashta, anga just means it has 8 parts. And so a lot of people are doing serious yoga. For example, there was serious Buddha yoga, yogachara, which literally means yoga conduct or yoga behavior. So, and you could say on the Hindu side of it, using the word Hindu roughly because it's not an authentic ancient word. It's just I can maybe tell you very quickly where the word Hindu comes from. There is a river, actually a big river, in what is now Pakistan called the Sindhu River. And in ancient times, east of the river was what we would now call Hindus, and west of the river was the Persian Empire. And so the Persians, in their ancient language, the Avestan language, they would pronounce an S, initial S at the beginning of the word as an H. So they pronounced Sindhu, Hindu. So all the people on the other side of the river were Hindus, meaning people on the other side of the river. And then the next door neighbors of the Persian Empire, of course, the Greeks. And Greeks did not pronounce an H at the beginning of a word. So the H is history, although they wrote it. So Hindu became Indu and eventually India. So that's where all these words come from. They were actually geographic terms. It didn't refer to a religion. And there's a whole history of how it came to refer to a religion. That's maybe a story for another day. You'll have to put more coins in the meter if you want to know that. So anyway, the Yoga Sutras assume that you know a certain philosophy, which is called Sankhya. In fact, if you look at the major intellectual or philosophical traditions of India in the last 1,000 or 2,000 years, they're usually paired so that, anyway, so yoga and Sankhya go together. Sankhya, even the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna uses that term Sankhya Yoga, which means something like philosophy and practice. So Patanjali is going to give the practice, including, and of course, most of the practice you could say is psychological. It involves controlling the mind. It involves meditating and really getting control of your mind so you can focus it on the highest truth. You can free yourself from miseries, most of which are actually mental more than physical. And so that's the practice, and the philosophy is called Sankhya. Now, in the Gita, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Sankhya yoga pratak bala pravadanti na pandita. He says that only those who are immature, or he used the word bala, which literally means child. So it's kind of a way in Sanskrit of saying childish or immature. It's pejorative here. So Krishna says those who are bala, those who are childish, claim, pravadanti, they claim that Sankhya and yoga are different, that philosophy and practice are different. And Krishna says that actually, ekam api yasti taksami, if you really master one of them, You'll get the benefit of both. Ubayor vindate phalam. So in other words, if you really practice well, you will realize the knowledge by advanced practice. And if you really get into the knowledge sincerely, not just as a sort of an armchair theologian, but if you really get into the knowledge and take it seriously, so that when you discover that something's true, the truth of it creates in you a sense of responsibility. The sense that I cannot knowingly do what is false. And so if I understand, if I've learned by my spiritual studies, if I've learned that something is actually true, that knowledge obliges me. I have to take responsibility for now knowing that, and I have to somehow mold my life so that it's consistent with what I know to be importantly true. For example, I know that Brussels is the capital of Belgium, but that doesn't really require me to do anything, right? I mean, it's just a fact, I know. But there are some facts which are so important that they naturally require you to respond authentically and to mold your life so that your life does not contradict what you know to be true. So that's the idea. So Sankhya and Yoga. So here we are with Patanjali, and he wrote this book. Now, in India at the time he wrote this book, first of all, India had religious freedom. Basically, in many parts of the world, including Greco-Roman civilization, including the West today, India forever, there was freedom of religion. There was freedom of religion. There was a type of religious syncretism that my God is also your God. We may use different names. They had some kind of theological debates on which God is really the ultimate, but basically there was mutual respect. And so, at the time that Patanjali's writing, India is like effervescent. It's just like there's all this very sophisticated debate going on because Buddhism has become strong in India, and they have their scholars and they have their yogis. And then there are different philosophies within what you call the Hindu side. You have the Upanishads. Have you ever heard of that? This sort of mystical, philosophical, theological literature with different ideas. Is everything one, or are souls individual? And there were people who were arguing in favor of ritual, that actually the power is in the ritual. Sacred rituals, fire sacrifice, which was done by the ancient Greeks, by the Zoroastrians. If you look at the ancient world, there was sort of a consensus that by igniting a sacred fire, by the way, ignite, Sanskrit, Agni, you know, the god of fire, Agni, that's our English word, ignite. So all over the ancient world, there was this idea that if you build a sacred fire and chant the right mantras, that you actually connect. It's literally a microcosm. And Patanjali is living in that culture. This is the culture that Patanjali is living in. So it's nice to know the world that he was in, where fire was considered to be potentially a sacred conduit, a medium, so you could actually, through a microcosm, you could connect to the macrocosm. If you understand that the absolute truth, or Brahman, is everywhere, is within everything, and everything is within Brahman, then everything is everywhere. I mean, materially, it's not possible that I'm in this room and the room is in me. Not going to happen. But spiritually, that's the idea. You find this in the Bhagavad Gita. Maya tatamidang sarvam, that everything is in the absolute is in everything. And so therefore, everything is everywhere. And if you master it, in a sense, what this ancient yoga did, maybe jump ahead, like ultimately, what were these people doing? Because you read the ancient texts, and you hear about people projecting their consciousness all over the universe, and doing, it's better than Disney World. And so, the idea is that through this yoga practice, or through the fire sacrifice, they consciously created a microcosm. If you read the ancient Sanskrit texts, as they mark out a space for the sacred fire rite, and then they, build the area around the sacrifice, they're consciously creating a microcosm. It's a map of the universe. And it's like, for example, imagine if you have a map on your computer screen, and by clicking on different points, let's say in Australia, something actually happens in those places. If you're connected, say you tap on, I don't know, a certain place in Sydney, and something actually happens there. So the idea was that the ancient fire sacrifice was consciously a microcosm through which you could access the universe. And that was the idea of yoga. And that's how also they got powers, because you could access different powers by yoga, again, by going through the microcosm to the macrocosm. That was the basic idea. I remember once when I was at Harvard, we were studying one of the ancient texts in Sanskrit about these sacrifices. I remember the professor said that obviously none of us really believe this works, and I had to raise my hand. So of course in those days, political correctness fortunately has guaranteed the professor could not challenge or denigrate my beliefs, and so I got away with it. Now, but there are signs in the Yoga Sutras proving that Patanjali is consciously being non-sectarian. For example, he doesn't use the word Brahman. Brahman is the great word of the Upanishads of the great philosopher Shankara. Brahman means the absolute or the ultimate spiritual truth. He doesn't use that word because probably Buddhist yogis are also going to read his book. And that was a great divide. Buddhists don't accept the Vedas. They have their nirvana and stuff. And so he doesn't use the word Brahman. He does use the word Isvara. And I actually wanted to hopefully amuse you by showing you some really kind of silly translations you can find out there. It's, Isvara means the Lord, the governor, the controller. It also means the supreme God, the supreme soul, Isvara. It's a word used in the Bhagavad Gita. For example, Krishna says, Ishvaroham, I am the Ishvara, I am the Lord. And so, but it's kind of a universal word, so that people that follow different traditions, and even Buddhists here, because Buddhism, I can't go into the whole history of Buddhism, but suffice it to say, it's kind of started as no frills. We don't do theology, we don't do metaphysics, we just have 4 important truths, which are you're suffering because you're selfish. Stop being selfish, you'll stop suffering. You want to stop being selfish? Sign right here. And practice Buddhism. So those are basically the 4 truths. And but by the time Patanjali's writing, Buddhism, in a use contemporary language, very competitive religious market, Patanjali is writing this book in a world, in a country where there's a lot of Buddhists, and they practice yoga. And in their own way, hopefully they can relate to the word Ishvara. So, the Yoga Sutra ultimately, you could say, is theistic. And I'll just give you a few examples. I took a few verses, like 123, there's 4 parts, so 1.23, and 126, which talk about Ishvara. And I want to give you a few translations that I kind of got a kick out of them, because they go into contortions to avoid the G word. And, get over it. So the Sanskrit for this sutra, this is actually 123. The Sanskrit is Ishvara Pranidhanatva. It's a discussion of how you can have spiritual realization. And va means or. Here's another thing you can do. It also, enlightenment comes from Ishvara Pranidhana, which means devotion to the Lord. Deep meditation on the Lord, devotion to the Lord. In fact, I even got the, anyway, I actually got from the standard Sanskrit dictionary. It's like, don't take my word for it. I'm just a, fanatical Hare Krishna. So here, the word Ishvara actually means in Sanskrit, supreme being, supreme soul, master, Lord. Pranidhana. It's Ishvara Pranidhanat. From Pranidhana, directed at Ishvara. Pranidhana means profound religious meditation, prayer, devotion. So here's one translation. I don't want to, make fun of other people, but here's just one translation. I won't tell you the author because I don't want to embarrass anybody. But this is kind of like a standard Yoga Sutra translation. So 1.23, Isvara Pranidhanadva, or you can get enlightenment by devotion to the Lord. So one person translated that realization may also come if one is oriented toward the ideal of pure awareness. Okay? So Isvara is taken to mean the ideal of pure awareness. So, yeah. So then there's another translation of the Yoga Sutras, the same verse, same sutra, which says, the goal can also be attained via submission to the concept of an ideal being. In other words, you do not want to actually submit to a superior being. Not in this narcissistic age. I don't know about Australia, but in America, as you can see, I'm easily amused. But in America, in yoga schools, they have this thing where they say that namaste means the divine in me bows to the divine in you. Did they say that in Australia? Yes. I always found that very amusing. It's kind of like the Western culture, like in America, it's so narcissistic, so individualistic, like, don't even dream that I'm going to bow to you. That's not going to happen. But the divine in me will bow to the divine in you, but I'm never going to bow to you. And it's just, I just thought it was amusing. Of course, that's not what the words mean. Namaste literally means a bow to you. It just means I bow to you. That's all it means. Anyway, so it's interesting how you can see how you get all these non-literal translations which are kind of adapting to Western, highly individualistic, highly proud culture. Of course, America now probably has gone beyond other countries in narcissism because we actually have a narcissist as our president. And so, you know, eat your heart out, Australia. So, then the Yoga Sutra 1.26, which is Sapurveshamapi Guru Kalena Avacheta, that Isvara is the guru even of the ancients. It's a guru even of the ancients. So one person translates it, Isvara was also the ideal of the ancients, not the guru. And Isvara is each and every one. The word guru actually means teacher. I mean, the word guru means what you think it means. And so here is a Yoga Sutra translation saying that, to say that the Isvara, the Lord, is the guru of the ancients means that Isvara is each and every one. Which, it's just not there in the Sanskrit. It's there in the mind of the translator. So that's just kind of a word of caution. That if you read the Yoga Sutras, of course, most people don't know Sanskrit, but I think you're safe here, actually. Do you have any questions? I was going to talk a little bit more about the Yoga Sutras, but if you have any questions, I wanted...
I'm just wondering what the difference is between the soul and the mental continuum, as it's referred, or the mind stream, as it's referred to in...
Thank you. Very good question. In not only the Yoga Sutras, but in this entire culture, including the Sankhya, the philosophical basis of the Yoga Sutras, the mind is understood to be a material element. And in the Bhagavad Gita, it's very explicitly stated that bhumir apo analo vayu kang mano, the mind, buddhireva cha, that earth, water, fire, air, mind, buddhi, intelligence, and false ego are the 8 material elements. By the way, you know, in ancient cultures, they said earth, water, and fire. They didn't have the periodic table, periodic chart, like in chemistry classes. It's not because they were like primitive. Sometimes people think that, oh, they said earth, water, and fire. They didn't know about oxygen and hydrogen and blah, blah, blah. They weren't primitive. So I mention that because the reason the elements were divided, earth, water, because they weren't trying to just exploit the world. They had a more subtle science. They were doing different things. And they were taking the world as it presents it. They were really talking about solids and liquids and radiant elements and gases and so on and so forth. But anyway, so the mind. The mind is considered to be a subtle material element. First of all, the mind stream, or we say in modern world, stream of consciousness. That's the term. All that means is that when you're awake, you're conscious. And so at every moment, you're conscious of something. That's the mind stream. It's just your conscious life. That's all that is. It's nothing really esoteric. This Patanjali is just talking about the experience of being continuously conscious. And he doesn't use the word stream literally. That's a translation. But he just means you're continuously conscious when you're awake. As far as samsara, That's just, that's the births and deaths. You reincarnate. And what governs your reincarnation is the law of karma. So karma is what decides where you take birth, and samsara is just the fact that you're reincarnating. And so the whole point of Bhagavad Gita and the whole point of Patanjali is that if you focus your mind, if you control your mind and focus your consciousness on the absolute, then you're going to escape samsara. So the whole point, samsara is the booby prize. And the whole point of practicing yoga is to free yourself from that.
So the whole construction or the binding to samsara is the conceptual mind.
Well, yeah, we become attached. Think of the word attachment. It literally, you're stuck to something. And the word in Sanskrit, which is actually the source of our English word, we say bind or bondage. That's Sanskrit bandhanam. Bandhanam, which is the same word. And so we attach ourselves. For example, let's say that I'm very attached to whatever, my house, or I'm very attached to my family or my country, or whatever I'm attached to. Obviously, I can't transcend karma. I can't go back to the spiritual platform because I'm holding on for dear life. And there's these very interesting existentialist verses, Bhagavad Gita 6.5 and 6.6, where Krishna says, only you can uplift yourself. Only you can degrade yourself. So ultimately, by our decisions, we choose to remain in this prison of samsara. And so if we decide, no, I want moksha, I want liberation, I want to be free, I want my real eternal life, then you start reading these books. And you start controlling your mind and focusing your mind on spiritual objects. Did I answered it, right?
You answered far more than I could have hoped.
Oh, that's good because there are no refunds. Okay, yes.